KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check. KLTV sound check.
Okay, I'll ask Commissioner Mortensen for his review of the minutes, please.
I move to approve the minutes of the activities last week.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Any questions, corrections?
I have no concerns.
I see none, so we'll call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Also vote aye. Thank you. I'll run over consent agenda just so we know today we do have a public hearing at 9:30, so I'll try to be cognizant of that time and make sure we start that on time. We'll head through the consent agenda. The first one is an agreements, contracts, bid awards. This is with Region 4 Educational Service Center Master and Mystics. We have a software, it's called PeopleSoft. We use it for different things as what tends to be not uncommon with software type issues. It has thresholds, cost thresholds when you surpass users, or you surpass in my previous world, when you surpass a certain amount in assets and stuff. And the county has surpassed a threshold. So what you're seeing here is an increase in costs for the next 3 years because we've graduated to a different threshold. So that's what that is. We had a letter from Federal FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're looking at the people out on the dam. They're looking at adding a rock filter and a drain berm. So the Regulatory Commission has listed some additional information they want for them before they do that. We received a letter from the city of Longview telling us they were putting a person on the solid waste advisory committee. That's not how that committee works. That committee is appointments to that particular committee. A lot of our committees is made by the BOCC. So you'll see the next one is a letter back to the city of Longview saying we didn't accept that appointment, and they're welcome to give us another recommendation. You've seen a few of these because of Thurston County regarding a resolution granting leave of absence and temporary appointment to our 19th district rep. You see that from the different counties. Items E and F are related. These are letters of support for the Port of Longview. They're doing some cleanup out there, and they've asked us for some letters of report of support, and that's what these two are. And then the last one is a letter to Keenan Harvey appointing him to the Homeless Housing Task Force representing the city of Kelso. It's a 2-year term, expires March 31st of 2026. And then we had vouchers in this last week that totaled $3,672,859.77. So questions, comments on the consent agenda? See none, I'll entertain a motion if you so desire.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted by staff.
We have a motion to approve. Chance for comments. Don't see any hands. Okay, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Also vote aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Under motion items, it looks like the Health and Human Resources show.
Hey, good morning. Gina James, Health and Human Services. We do have 4 items on the agenda this morning. The first 3 items number 3, 4, and 5 are related. They are regarding coordinated entry. So we have three providers that we've been working with to help with coordinated entry. emergency support shelter, family health center, and community house on Broadway. As a reminder, for folks in the room, coordinated entry is a referral process that we're required to have. There are some housing programs that are required by their funders to only accept referrals into those housing programs through this system called coordinated entry. And the county is tasked with making sure that that happens. As I mentioned, we've been working with these 3 providers and have had good luck in doing so. We have a variety. People are able to connect with who they work with or who they feel comfortable connecting with for coordinated entry. We see about 1,000 households connect with coordinated entry each year. This past year, we ended up doing 876, what's called a resource screening. So that's really just gathering some basic information, and it's sort of twofold. One is to help connect with just mainstream services. So if somebody says they're interested in behavioral health, then we might give them information on behavioral health providers in the community. The information we gather goes into the homeless management information system, and that's what we use to identify individuals for referrals when there's housing openings in certain projects. So last year, we were able to refer 133 individuals to housing programs. That's based on the capacity of those programs. So when a program has an opening, they reach out and say, hey, we need a referral. And then we look at who has connected with coordinated entry and make a referral from that list. The bulk of those referrals are for HEN, the HEN Rapid Rehousing Program, for that housing program. Let's see, we had some conversation yesterday about the funding source for these contracts. It has historically been document recording fees. We also have the ability to fund some of this work from our state contract. We'll be reaching out to legal to work on some language. What I think will need to happen is if we move forward and pass these contracts today, we would do a really brief amendment adding, and it would basically just be to be referencing the state contract. So anytime we are going to fund with a separate contract, we'll want to reference that contract to make sure the requirements are passed through. So I think what would end up happening is just a really simple amendment to reference the contract in that case. But I think it's allowable, and I think we would be able to do that pretty easily.
Just for the audience, our state contract with Washington is about 4.3, somewhere in that area. And we don't usually utilize, it's a reimbursement type contract. So you incur the expense and you get reimbursed on most of that. We don't usually utilize all of that. So if we can free up some doc recording fees for other projects and utilize some of the expense out of a contract that we don't spend the whole funds on anyway, it seemed like it made sense for us to take a look at that.
Yep. Yeah.
Gina, you mentioned something called HMIS, Homeless Management Information System.
Yes.
And that information is operated statewide, correct? So that's a mechanism counties can use or coordinated entry can use to identify if people have qualified for services elsewhere in the state, if they're moving from place to place. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, it is limited. So in Cowlitz County, for example, I can only see the programs in Cowlitz County or who's enrolled in programs within Cowlitz County. So I'm not able to see another county's program. So I couldn't look in Lewis County and see if someone were enrolled in a program in Lewis County, for example. So it is kind of separated out by counties in that sense.
So you mentioned that the bulk of the assistance given to the folks is through the HEN program. The HEN program provides personal items or vouchers for personal items, rent vouchers and so on. But you don't know if they've also qualified in another county, so that.
Well, so that one is a little bit
Okay.
unique because it is a state assistance program. So part of the eligibility and verification that we do before we make a referral is we are reviewing that person's eligibility in the benefits verification system, which is the statewide assistance system. So we will look at that, and they are sort of assigned by county in that system as well. So we would only be able to do a referral if they were in Cowlitz County or assigned in Cowlitz County. And not if they were in another county, we would direct them towards the other county.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
The three different agencies that we have the coordinated entry contracts with right now are the community house on Broadway, the emergency support shelter, and then the third one is the family health center. And you mentioned that we'd only identified 133 new referrals last year.
That's how many program openings there were that needed referrals.
Okay.
Yep.
I also mentioned yesterday that each year we have a count in time where we identify how many people are, quote, labeled as homeless. And that number is typically 2 to 3 times the number of new referrals. What I'm getting at, the suggestion is we might be missing somebody who's homeless out there. And I'm wondering if there's yet one more agency that might have access to additional people that might be coming in homeless. The one provider that isn't on the list, well, there are a number of smaller operations, but the other major agency is the Salvation Army. Do they have the capacity to also offer coordinated entry? Have they inquired about that at all?
So what's happening right now is there is, I believe it's Family Health Center who has one of their coordinated entry staff will go down to Hope Village and connect with individuals down there to see if they are connected with coordinated entry, if they need to check in or update their information, things like that. So that's the partnership we have going on right now to make sure that those individuals are sort of in the list for a potential housing referral.
And at a different location, Salvation Army is offering meals still,
I believe so.
and they have a housing facility as well, a converted motel, I think. So I'm just wondering if their other office, the other location is another area where they get people that may otherwise qualify. I don't know. If they're not asking for it, I guess that's we don't need to worry about that.
They do serve individuals. They have, I believe it's called the Hope House. They have some units down there by their main building. And certainly if those individuals wanted to connect with coordinated entry, I'm sure their case manager there would help them either go in or call one of the access points.
And that program is a transitional housing program, or is that permanent support? Do you know?
I believe it's transitional. I'm not 100% sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just had those questions that
Yeah.
popped up.
Yeah.
Now, I need to clarify in my own mind. You said 100 and some, whatever that number is. That was the night beds or whatever we had. I mean, you could have 50 people, 50 organizations referring, but we only had this many beds.
Right,
Is
so
that how
the-
to read that?
The 133, those were program openings in the projects that are required to accept referrals only from coordinated entry. And it's primarily the HEN program. There are many other housing programs in the community like Oxford House and even the Hope House that we were just talking about, Country Run. There's a lot of other housing programs that aren't required to accept referrals. Coordinated entry will certainly let individuals know about those resources that are out there as well, but they don't get captured in the same way. We don't have a way of following that to know like who actually got in, who's enrolled and things like that. So it doesn't capture all of those other programs.
Yeah, and I understand that. I'm just trying to, like, we had I keep forgetting the number, 153. So only 153 applied, or could have 500 applied, but we only had 100 openings for 153?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and I get the concern that we might be missing people, but I'm not sure we are. I don't think we had the bed capacity.
Right. That number of referrals is because those programs had openings. So if there were more openings in those programs, then we would have referred more individuals. Yeah.
So we know from their annual reports, Community House serves 600 to 650 people a year. Short term, that's more than their current capacity, of course, but that's over the course of a year. Same thing with emergency support shelter. They're helping around about last time I checked on their annual reports, their numbers were around 250. You add those two together and you've got 850 homeless people. And you mentioned we estimate about 1,000, 1,100 a month or a year. So all total long, people are losing houses, for all kinds of different reasons. So one of the other goals for coordinated entry is to refer to treatment programs for those who have substance misuse, disuse programs, as well as mental health. And I know that most people accept the idea that those folks, many of the folks who are homeless, particularly the chronically homeless, are struggling with these disabilities. Do we have any follow-up to find out, once identified, are these folks who are getting assistance for homelessness are actually going to treatment and taking steps to make a change in their lives?
Not through coordinated entry. No, they will share information with individuals about what agencies they can connect with. They also often refer to services like foundational community supports, where they might be able to receive services from a case manager that can help follow them along and get them connected, make sure they get connected to those types of services. But that's not happening through coordinated entry.
And of course, we have to respect HIPAA laws and people's privacy, but it seems to me reasonable that we ought to be able to ask what the numbers are. How successful is this attempt to introduce people to treatment as part of their, as part of the suite of services we try to provide to help them get into more permanent housing. Is that something that we can ask for to get the numbers, say?
From coordinated entry?
Or
where would we
from
get
providers, I know it's not part of coordinated entry, although that's part of their referral service, isn't it?
They will refer people to those services. Yes. It's the follow-up. It's hard to know who might go and connect, and then how do you keep track of that and know if they did or stayed engaged or anything like that, unless you're the one, providing the case management to that individual and they're sort of on your caseload. But I don't know, reaching out to treatment providers, and I'm not sure how we would be able to tell if someone, goes from coordinated entry or not. I'm not sure if they would have that type of information.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So there are a lot of interesting questions. I'll start out with just saying I'm happy you're looking at alternate sources for the funding of coordinated entry. I look at the doc recording fees as intended to deal with first order homelessness. And the problem in the universe is that everything is intertwined, and we intertwine welfare and homelessness in such a manner that we can't ever extricate ourselves or really find out what is true or not true. We experienced some of this in the COVID era when we were, some of us, suspicious about did the person die of old age or did die of this COVID-19. It doesn't help us to conflate those things. And as long as we don't make a distinction between those people that are homeless based on the policies that have been inflicted upon them, For example, despite what it might seem, rent subsidies will lead to homelessness. And then there are the self-inflicted ones where I really hung one over last night, and again for the fourth time this month, and I lost my job as a consequence of that. And now I can't pay the rent. So there are all kinds of things. So I'm really happy we're trying to clean that up. If we stick by a first order interpretation of the funding sources, we can start to clean up some stuff. Next thing is just to understand, if I were to be a service provider and coordinated entry would point somebody to me for the bed, does that mean that if someone else came by, I could not take that person? It's exclusively through, okay, that's what I thought you said, just checking. All right, and you mentioned that the counties are isolated in that you cannot see what Pierce County is doing, or maybe Lewis County even closer. So can you comment, if you were in charge, would you allow the visibility or not?
I think it would be helpful to see history of where someone has connected with. It might help shed light on where they might have connections or natural supports or things like that. I think it would be helpful to see that information kind of across.
I think that's just common sense. So do you understand what the rationale for the isolation is?
I think it's a confidentiality safeguard from the state's perspective. So I think they're trying to protect information. When someone comes in, before we can enter them in, we have to ask that they sign a release of information, basically, to enter their information in this system. And at this point, that's county by county. That's my assumption. I don't know that for sure without asking.
So if I'm in Lewis County and then I sign the release, wouldn't you be able to ask for that information?
No.
Okay.
No, they would have to sign another release.
Okay, then another one is pretty tough. We sort of explored this in the past, and that verification is an interesting thing. We have a very hard time with verification in lots of circumstances. How do we do it here?
So I mentioned the verification system that we use for the HIN clients. Is that what you're asking about?
Not so much it's the old data, garbage in, garbage out kind of thing.
Oh.
If I go to you and I say, I'm Larry Crosby, do you ask me to prove to you that I'm Larry Crosby?
So
I just wear a red hat and suspenders and I'm good?
I would say, yes, you're Larry Crosby. So it is based on what individuals tell us. So if we're sitting doing the paperwork, they will share with us the information. There is not a lot of digging and deep dive to, verify that someone's living on the street. We don't go out and
Got it, right.
see that. And so it is a lot of self-referral. Now, when it gets to making a referral to a housing project, there may be some more verification that happens. Sometimes there's income requirements, for example, and we would want to verify that to make sure that we're making a good referral, so that someone's making the level of income that they're telling us.
Yeah, and if there are 3 agencies that we're contemplating doing the contract on, and I like competition, so I don't mind that. That'll lead me to another question if I'll write my notes so I remember it. But I'm more interested in what stops me, or have you seen someone go to agency A, get a referral to someplace, go to agency B, get another referral, and agency C and get another referral? I would think that's not uncommon, but I'm asking.
Right. So if someone connects with multiple access points, they would get the same information about mainstream services. When I say mainstream services, I'm just talking about any service that anyone could walk in to try to access. When it comes to the specific housing referrals that we make, the data that gets entered from all three of the access points comes to one location. And that's HHS looks at that to identify someone for a referral. And so we're looking at all of that data together, not separated by agency. And the agencies themselves aren't identifying the individual for the housing referral separately. It's all coming to us in one system so we can see all the information together.
And I did write a note about what I was going to ask. Oh, yeah. So do you have a way to figure out who is doing a good job or not? Initially, we had a single point, a single entity doing coordinated entry. And the board kind of suggested to explore it. And from what I hear you say, that turned out to be a useful thing. And now I'm asking, is there a set price for some set action? Is family health center more or less expensive than any of the other two?
It fluctuates depending on who's connecting with them. So, it's cost reimbursement. So they'll bill us for time they spend with doing the coordinated entry specific work only. So if 400 people go to one agency and 200 people go to the other, there's going to be a difference there in what they bill us. What I will say is,
Could you run through that again? That example, I didn't follow what the metric was.
I was just explaining that if it's cost reimbursement contracts, and so they're only able to bill us for the coordinated entry specific work that they do.
Do they do that by time?
Right.
So they've got a chess clock that they tap and start.
They'll keep track of what they're doing for coordinated entry, and they might do other work in other program areas with the agency as well. So they're only able to bill us for that time doing coordinated entry specific work. That's in the contract.
Okay, I got that. So in this case, if we know that from the $4.3 million contract, if with the Department of Commerce, if we don't spend it all, it goes back. That applies here too, or does this always get spent?
No, it's often under actually. And so the contracts have just an up to amount, so they will never go over. And it's often under. So it just depends on the fluctuation of individuals they're connecting with. And then, some clients you can spend a half an hour with, and others might spend 2 hours in your office. So it just kind of varies in that sense as well.
Right, but you've got enough numbers, so statistically you can say like, is 10% unspent usually, or?
Yes. And it depends if there's staffing changes and some things like that. So, yeah.
I think that's all I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the amounts in your recommendations are pretty much a mirror of the last several years, the annual not to exceeds.
Yes. And
So we're not talking about more money going
Right.
towards coordinated entry, just the same.
correct.
And again, I was originally assuming that coordinated entry only talked to 133 people, but that's not true. That's
No.
just the new referrals, people on the system.
It's the 1,000.
It's the
Yeah,
1,000,
it's the
okay.
1,000.
All right. And which of the three actually interviews the most?
This last year, Family Health Center did the most resource screenings, followed by CHOB. So, and they usually are pretty close with each other.
Sure.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Efficiency and a little bit of metrics here. I was just doing a little bit here. Here's $150,000 for this coordinated entry, and you talked about 153 new entries last year. I quickly add that up, it's $1,000 a piece for just coordinated entry. No real service provided, just coordinated.
So
entry.
that's what I just double checked with her. They're interviewing up to 1,000 people a year, right?
That's correct.
And the 130 figure was brand new people entering the system
So the others are repeats, ongoing repeats,
or ongoing.
The
ongoing.
the
right.
133 is the number that were able to be referred to a housing project. But the others connect with coordinated entry, 1,000 people roughly per year, and they'll become aware of other resources in the community as well that they might be able to access.
I think the concept of new people is confusing here. It's offered, the low offered is like 1,000 people and only 133 were successful. And
You made a key statement, confusing. If I was in private enterprise and running a business like this, I'd like to know what the heck is really going on, what the numbers are, what the success rate is. Are we getting better or getting worse? Everything we look at seems to be getting worse. And so some way we've got to make some changes to get a little better or a little better results. Well, we can't do that if we don't know what the hell's going on and if we can't measure it. So I'm just confused here is that you say we can't go to Lewis County, we can't check on these things. I think we need to be working a little further on understanding what the overall metrics are and the results are. And you say most appropriate community resources. That's what they refer to. Do you have a list of the most appropriate community resources that they're making these references to?
We have a resource guide that we will give to individuals. It's about 7 pages and counting, that lists a variety of resources from food to laundry to behavioral health, transportation, anything individuals could want. And so when they connect with coordinated entry, they might specifically be asking for one of those resources, and we can just pull that out and say, here, 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 these are the places you can connect with to try to access that service.
Well, since we're paying for all of this one way or another, do you have a complete total list of what are the appropriate community resources for our county here?
I can get you a copy of the resource guide if you'd like.
Sure. Okay, if I can make sense out of it, that would be great. So anyway, then the final question is Cowlitz Family Health Center the new name for Love Overwhelming? Just a question?
No.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
That's a pretty long-standing medical clinic funded by the federal government based on number of low-income people in the population. And
good morning. If the old guy with a red hat and suspenders wanted to become a community or a coordinated entry, whatever you call them, what are the requirements, professional requirements for that position?
So to be an access point, like these other
Be
agencies.
the individual that has all these people come to them and then you do the process.
Sure. So we ended up working with these 3 agencies because they responded to a request for proposals, where they submitted a proposal to us through an open competitive process, and these 3 agencies were selected. We could do another process. We could do another RFP to see if there are also other agencies. But that's the process to sort of get to be able to be one of the coordinated entry access.
but in each of those agencies, is there someone with specific training for interviewing and
Yes.
and analyzing? I think, is that what you were asking, Larry?
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
So-
that's a good answer to the wrong question.
There is specific training. that we do with with new staff at the agencies, and there's also state required training as well. So it's a combination of required trainings that all new staff who want to do coordinated entry work or will be assigned coordinated entry work have to go through before they sit down and start meeting with individuals.
How is that related to a professional requirement? Like a doctor or dental assistant? I mean, is it a specific category?
There's not any educational or experience qualifications connected to being able to be a coordinated entry provider or staff. You just have to go through the required trainings and be able to complete the tasks.
Well, I might come right down. This sounds easy. My next question is, do you do professional level background checks on anybody on all people that come into the system?
No.
You do know that when we did background checks on the people that were the original 111 from Camp Alabama, we got the records, we did the background checks, and I can't remember the exact number, but between 30 and 40 of them didn't even give the right names.
Mm.
Yeah, they were fakes.
Mm.
How many fakes
Interesting.
do you have?
I don't know.
That's the problem.
Mr. Chairman, I know we have a public hearing scheduled for 9:30. Can we, do we need to go forward with that?
If we're ready for a motion on this, I wouldn't mind getting this vote out of the way, do that, and interrupt, and you have to stick around for the last one.
Okay.
Okay. Did you want to? Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I move that we go ahead and renew the contracts to Family Health Center, Community House on Broadway, and Emergency Support Shelter for continuing the coordinated entry program as requested by staff, extending the contracts with no additional increase in the maximum amount available.
Okay, we have a motion. Looking for hands or any additional comments? I'm seeing none. Call for the vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye. So we will put the next item after the public hearing, okay? All right. Okay, we're gonna move to public hearing on building and planning. For you. Get into this. I thought I'll offer some comments on this, and certainly then let my colleagues take some time for comments if they want. Wanted to point out a couple things on this. This is really not a function of our building and planning department. It's tough because they're in the middle and they can't take the brunt for it, but it's really a function of a Washington State Commission or committee that makes all these decisions, and it gets passed down to the counties without a lot of input from them. So they're the ones that sit in the hot seat, but it's really it's not a function that they're driving. They're responding to and trying to do the best they can with it. This is a plan. I think it happens every 4 years. Am I right? 3 years, that will add costs and regulations to building homes in this county. There's no doubt about it. We've talked to enough builders. We know that it's going to add costs and regulations. It's a process that in my mind it's not consumer driven, it's agenda driven. It's a commission that when I looked it up, I'm trying to recall, I think there's a senator that sits on it, and I think there's a representative sit on it, and I think the rest of them are appointed by the governor. any governor in any state, if you has political priorities, has things she wants to accomplish. When they put people on committees or commissions or whatever you want to call them, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that they're going to appoint people that try to fulfill their objectives. So I think a lot of what comes out of that is agenda driven by, all you have to do is listen to our governor, climate change, carbon, whatever you want. It's agenda driven. It's not consumer driven and it causes some real angst with me. The other part you hear a lot about is you're going to see regulations. We're going to be asked to adopt regulations that are going to add costs to not only building, but septic systems and everything else. And then you hear them talk almost incessantly about affordable housing. You can't hardly turn a newspaper or listen to anything from the legislature and they aren't screaming about affordable housing. The trouble with their definition of affordable housing is, I'll tell you again, I believe it's agenda driven. They're in the House capital budget right now, there's 518 million set aside for communities for affordable housing. The indication that it's agenda driven is right there. If it's consumer driven, it doesn't require any money from the state to be. If we have people lined up, consumer wanted a product, you can bet a builder is going to build it. So what these programs are to fund things that are more agenda driven. Yeah, they want them in urban areas. They want them in your cities, and they don't want you out in the rural. They want you in the cities. They basically want you in, I would call it, in multi-story bird cages, and you can get money for that. Well, if the majority of people wanted to live in multi-story bird cages, builders would already be building them. So the affordable housing stuff coming out of Olympia is just agenda-driven nonsense. It has nothing to do with making things better for consumer. If you wanted to really do something about affordable housing, I can tell you how to do that, and I can tell you how to do it very easily. You get rid of the regulation that drives up costs. We are very fortunate in our county. I've dealt with Mike and I've dealt with Wayne. These are highly intelligent people and know they could, I guarantee you, they could sit down and write a building code that would build you an affordable, structurally sound home that would last for decades with reasonable maintenance and care. And it would not cost an arm and a leg. If people want to add the bells and whistles, they can do that. But we have the ability right here to write something that could actually make affordable housing and do that. So I just, they don't see affordable housing in the same way we do, is what I'm trying to tell you. We look at it and we say, what's best for the consumer? They look at it and they say, how can we drive our agenda? And it gets disgusting to me. So the real question today for me is not really a debate on this policy. It's how serious are we about actually trying to provide some affordable housing for our citizens? How serious we've got it written in our plans. How serious are we about that? Do we stand with citizens and drive ordinance based on citizen needs and freedoms? Or do we comply with mandates because we're told to? Do we comply with mandates because it could involve litigation to the point of county and personal? Do we comply with mandates because of the unknown costs of doing that? Does it affect, do we apply with mandates because we don't know what it does to insurance or mortgage? I mean, how far do we bend? And I'll tell you, I had an email from our, I love our council. I think they're super intelligent. Basically telling me today, I have no choice. But if those of you who know me, I don't answer to Olympia. I answer to somebody much higher than any of that. So to me, that's the question. That's the debate today, is where do you want to go? And how much pain are you willing to incur to get there? Because it's more than just, there's no reason to take any anger or anything out on these people sitting over here. They're told what they're supposed to do and they're trying to convey that to us. So it's not a debate that building and planning is trying to screw you. They're not. It's a debate on when you fight back against Olympia and you do the right thing for your people, or is the right thing complying because it saves them money or it saves them litigation? I don't know. It's the debate I think that needs to happen. But we're here to look at this. So I'll get off my horse, and if my colleagues have things they'd like to add, they're more than welcome.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. In large part, I agree with the chairman. There's some distinctions, but I'd staying at the level that's fairly high. I had previously spoken this morning and talked about the conflation of things, and that earlier it was the housing and the welfare system, and not having clean boundaries in there makes for a mess. Well, if we put some common sense here, we see that we've got basically two categories of people out there that build homes. The developers, the big housing tract homes, and the mom and pop homes, and we apply the same rules to each of them. That doesn't sound unreasonable until you realize the different pressures that they're under. The big developers, the pressures they have is time is money. To the mom and pop, they have more time than the money, and they've got the personal relationships with grandma and so forth. And hence the ADUs came along and so forth with help. But as long as we continue to let the people that are big developers influence the building code, mom and pop have very little choice. They're going to have to come along. And the time factor is so important to the developer, the big developer, that they don't care whether you add another $5,000 to the cost of a house. They just want to get the house built and done now so they can move on and do it again. Mom and pops don't have that. So then that probably leads me into the next statement. In the Art of War, Sun Tzu explains that there are battles to fight and battles not to fight. And the real wisdom occurs in not fighting a battle when you don't have the proper advantage in order to prevail. And that's where we are here. A lot of you weren't here early on, but when I first came on board, I had the same thing where I had no choice. And I penned that's some of the nomenclature, which included signing with my nose pinched because it smelled so bad. And I think that's kind of the position that we're in now. I will say that for me, today is not the day to fight the battle with Olympia. We simply do not have the strength. We do not have the ability to survive the counterpunch. The counterpunch will be that something that everything that these folks have worked for is thrown out, and they will have to they'll have to evaluate things strictly by what the state code is, no flexibility. If we really want to change these things, it's going to involve the entire public, actually. I've mentioned before, we can go and stand at the Monticello Quad, 100 of us or 300 of us even, and that'll seem like a sizable demonstration. but it won't change anything. By the time we get sick and tired of this enough and 3,000 of us show up there, now we're going to start to move the needle. We need to build up to that point. Anyhow, yesterday this was discussed in detail, and I think probably you want to hear it. It was well done. It was brief, and I certainly appreciated things being succinct.
Everybody's looking at me. We have been battling the unnecessary rules and regulations. One of my favorite ones are the sinkholes that are now a part of all apartment house complexes. They're just sinkholes, and they're supposed to be stormwater collection basins. Usually take up to about a quarter of the lot size of an apartment complex. There may be some areas where that's important, where there's no other way of collecting the drainage, but that majority of people in Cowlitz County who live protected by dikes already have a collection system for stormwater, and that's totally unnecessary. We can't seem to get the rules changed. One of the other areas that drives up costs in developments is if you want to provide affordable housing and follow the rules and apply for a government grant to assist in cutting your own personal costs, in the fine print, you can't pay wages at whatever agreement you can make with workers. You got to pay the prevailing wages. And then contractors say that automatically raises the prices. So there's a lot of those requirements that come down to us. We can fight. Having said that, though, I think some of the good news is that part of this proposal does allow Cowlitz County to put our stamp of approval on certain things. And and we're going to hear a little bit about that in terms of making the processes for contractors clearer and easier to comply with, because surprisingly, the state code sometimes leaves stuff out and is confusing, and we can fix those kinds of things for our customers. We can also provide exemptions for certain groups of people that we know how to build and meet all of the codes and are building things all the time. I'm thinking about folks at the main industries. They shouldn't have to get a building permit for every single little thing that they do. They know what to do correctly, and they do that. A few years ago, we actually were one of the leading counties in adopting a flexible system for providing fire protection in that area between the urbanizing neighborhoods and forests, as a strategy to try to slow down or prevent wildfires. And the state would have you believe you have to sprinkle everything. And we came up with alternatives. If you put in extra space and do different types of landscaping, there are other strategies that you can choose to do to avoid that very expensive additional cost of sprinkling. That only came about because counties were able, we do have a little bit of flexibility. I know they want to talk about that. I'm anxious for the presentation to share with those things where we can actually make a difference and help contractors do the building that needs to be done while having to suffer through the rules that come down to us from the state.
Well, good morning, commissioners. There's really not a whole lot else I can add to that. That was a pretty good setup. Yes, this is Title 16 of the Cowlitz County Code, the periodic update of the building codes as adopted by the state of Washington. It does occur and supposed to occur in cycles of 3 years. However, for the past several years, that's not been the case. So here we are today, facing March 15th with the adoption of the 2021 code in the year 2024. And as you mentioned, yes, the intent here is that while we're required to enforce the code, it's to the community's interest if we can be responsive to the needs of the community. And that's what the county code's all about, is to listen to the community and see, make determination where we can make accommodation while remaining consistent with the code. And you'll find that that's what the county code reads, is those areas of enforcement, violations, means of appeals, addressing exemptions from permits, to protection from fire. What is reasonable given the level of resources, infrastructure available in our community without adding unnecessary burden to the builder or the developer? So that in essence is what the county adoption is all about. And, you know, we're not required to adopt the code, but we are required to enforce the code. I know it seems kind of counterintuitive, but that's the nature of it. So it's best that we can adopt something that includes some flexibility, you know, unique to our county.
A question. What happens if tomorrow you decide you're not going to enforce anything but common sense rule regulations? So there'll be 1,000 check boxes that you don't check. And let's say the board supports you in that and you do exactly that. What's the consequence?
Well, I'm certain that legal could probably advise you better than I.
That's the right answer.
There would be time, we would come to a point where a decision must be made. Do I either comply with the code or violate the code? For instance, ultimately a building may have progressed and then suddenly the curtain drops and I'm unable to issue a certificate of occupancy, which I would find at my doorstep very quickly, the homeowner and the mortgage servicer as to why they cannot obtain their concluding documentation.
I didn't follow that. My scenario was that in fact you do issue the occupancy permit because you've made sure that it was common sense all the way through, not bureaucratic, but just if you build it like this, you'll be safe or safe enough. So it is a question that only our counsel, our attorneys can answer. And unless somebody else here knows the answer. Yeah, never mind. I could go on, but.
Okay, we'll open up public comment.
I know throughout here, there's a whole lot of things that say code compliance agency is not adopted. There's a lot of sections that are not adopted. Means of appeals is not adopted. Violations is not adopted. Some of them I can't see. I see the reference to where that goes somewhere, but it doesn't tell me the rest of the code that I can look at that's not adopted.
Well, there was a very large stack of books I could have brought.
I'm sure there is.
But fundamentally, what those address are the administrative provisions of the code. And legal counsel has crafted ways that we are going to address enforcement violations and means of appeals locally, rather than that which is prescribed at the state level. So for instance, you may have a board of appeals. Okay, well, we've chosen to use a hearing examiner, a hearing process, rather than assembling a board of appeals. That's an example. So here we are endeavoring to craft a code that's useful for this community. So where you see those things there, this is not adopt, that's not, most of those are administrative processes. Now, there are some that are unique to a particular aspect of the code, whereby we found that there is something that can be done better, and we have the authority to make that decision administratively.
So in the building process, somebody comes and gives you plans and you approve them and they get a permit. And at what point do you do inspections? And then my big question here is, after the building is up, 5 years down the road, do you ever follow up and make sure that that site is still in compliance? Or is it a done deal once the building gets put up?
Well, I'm not certain. I believe that a homeowner would be very interested in us coming by and making periodic inspections of their house. No, once it's done, it's done. It's the responsibility of the homeowner to maintain it.
And the key document is the occupancy. of
Yes,
that.
it's issued a certificate of occupancy that demonstrated on this day, on conclusion of the construction process and the inspection process, it was found to be in compliance with the code. Now, do they remain that way? Not always.
So for a home, how many inspections would be involved in that process?
That varies, typically 15 to 20 inspections. There are some mandatory inspections that the code specifically requires. And then there are those inspections that we may implement because we find that there's a redundancy of failure. Early on, there was a lot of failure with water penetrations through buildings. And this was because of incorrect applications of new materials. As technology evolves, new materials are introduced into the building trades, there is that learning curve of proper installation. And so we may emphasize inspections in that aspect for a while. Another one was adhered applied masonry veneer. When that was brought to, the marketplace, a lot of people wanted it. There weren't a lot of people who knew how to install it. And so we saw repetitive failures. So we emphasized inspections of that for a while, until we find that, people are catching up to speed and we no longer need to inspect that. Our intent's not to burden people with inspections that are going to obstruct the construction process. It's just simply to demonstrate that it complies with the code, because ultimately this is going to be a product that's there. Its expected life is 75 years or so. It may be traded, from one party to another. There's a certain understanding, reliance that when you go to look at a house or buy a house or enter a building, that you are confident to a reasonable degree that it's useful.
So are these codes just for single family dwellings, or are they multiple family or multiple houses on the same property or whatever?
Pardon me? Can you?
Are they for multifamily dwellings?
The code?
Do these codes cover?
They cover everything from what you find out at the riverfront, all the industrial, all the way down to sheds that don't qualify for exemption from permit, accessory dwelling units, single family dwellings, multifamily dwellings, stores, gas stations,
Okay,
the mills, everything.
All right.
Yeah.
thank you.
This is more of a personal thought, because we're planning on building a home. About 10 years ago, we sold some property off the front part of our pasture and to a wonderful couple. When they built their home, the then person that would come out to inspect, and this word international really gets to me, because they had to make their home tornado proof. The cost of doing so was exorbitant, with metal ties down on, no windows on one side, the whole gambit. Considering if we'd like to move and build a home, I don't want to have to make it international in that aspect, where it would be okay, like in Florida or someplace where there's a tornado. I want it appropriate for the Northwest. We don't have tornadoes except for maybe, well, I don't think we have huge ones if we had little ones, but it's just not appropriate to have the house built to that extent here. So is that some sort of a problem that, okay, it was at that one time and now we don't have that restriction? Because I don't want to face that when I build a home. I don't want to have it to be appropriate for every part of the United States and every, snow level for the back east. I don't want it for it to pertain to my house now that I build.
Well, the term international is simply refers to the body of codes that the state has chosen to adopt. The International Code Council writes the variety of codes. They're adopted in many states throughout the country. Thus, the term international code, it extends beyond the borders. As far as specific design requirements, There are local requirements. For instance, you mentioned snow load. We have a table A in our county ordinance that references snow loading, ground snow load factor as a function of elevation. And it progresses obviously as you get higher. There are identified wind regions and the wind speed associated with that. Those most aggressive are along the riverfront. And these factors are used by, say, the engineer to design the building, structurally. And they will apply their best science, knowledge, and practices to arrive at a conclusion. Engineers tend to be somewhat protective, conservative when they create their design because obviously they're putting their stamp on it. So and remember, they must also comply with the code. So what an engineer may have designed 30, 40 years ago would be yeah. Well, I'm just saying what they would have designed 30, 40 years ago would have been vastly different than what you'd find today, simply because of the requirements that imposed upon them as well.
So perhaps maybe that requirement that they had the Kinseys do would not be in effect now if we were to build a house.
It depends on where it's located, the size of the house, the height of the house. There's a lot of variables to be considered. I would have to have a specific example to review to understand.
Okay, and what you were referring to a little earlier was that if we, after we got a permit and the specs for the house, and we presented to the county and he said, well, we have to do this, this and that, we could appeal that and say, well, you know, that particular item maybe would be overdone and we wouldn't have to be quite, I mean, we could appeal whatever decision would be made on the house.
Well, the review process is largely a discussion, you know, because there's infinite number of ways to build the mousetrap, so to speak. I mean, you know, adjust here, make adjustments there, you know, so the review process occurs between the plans examiner and the designer, and it's a matter of coming to agreement as to what works, what's cost effective. If there's a better or simpler way to do something, certainly.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My opening would be that if we could do anything simple, it would say postpone the implementation moratorium for a year or 2 years or 5 years, because everything we're building today should be good for the next 5 years without imposing a bunch more regulations. You might know of some specifics that might be an exception to that. The unfortunate thing is that it isn't just homeowners and the builders, as you've said. The designer of the building, whatever it is, or structure, has to put all of this down. I look at my house tonight, you have 5 pages of sketches and you have one full big sheet of all the notes and everything else that has to go with it, et cetera. I almost need an attorney to interpret all of them. So anyway, the key point is that as you said, mandates. So if our governor mandated wearing masks to go into the house, then we would probably be addressing that to find out, is that mandatory or not? And we would say, no, that's not mandatory. So it gets back to, I'm hoping that in the meetings, we can discuss some of the details that go on to all of the criteria for these buildings out of the International Building Code.
I want to thank you for some of the clarifications you made right at the beginning, Commissioner Dole. This is stuff that's kind of handed down by the state. I'm here on my own personal capacity. I'm the chair of the Building and Planning Advisory Committee as well. But I'm here on my personal capacity right now at the moment. I've worked through a lot of the policy that they're adopting today. I want to make some clarifications on it. And then I want Mike to just kind of confirm. This doesn't address the upcoming energy code at all, right, for the 15th?
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does? This is,
The energy code is part of the body of codes adopted by the state of Washington and enabled as of the 15th of this month.
so this does take that into account. Okay. Um,
It's been something of a moving target, but
yeah.
at the current second edition printed still stands.
Okay.
I have not heard anything other than that at this point.
Okay. So it does pull that into play.
Yeah.
It does, urban fire, wildland stuff. We work through that a lot, and it provides some very necessary or some very beneficial clarifications. I do want to just, I guess, on my part, add that we've worked extensively and kind of listened through the work that Mike has been putting forward on it, and I do appreciate the battle that they've been up against on this. It's not been anything that I think anybody's desired to have to do. So I personally think that with what we've been handed, it's about as good as I think we could do with what we've been handed. So it actually has my support on the county level. So that was it.
Appreciate that. And also, the BPAC is where, we discuss ideas, is there something specific that maybe we're not seeing? We don't want to develop blinders and not be responsive to the needs of the community and the builders. So, BPAC serves that function very well.
So Mike, you used that acronym BPAC. Probably there aren't too many people who know what that refers to and who's on it.
Well, good morning, Commissioners. Tracy Jackson, Director of Building and Planning. It's the Building and Planning Advisory Committee, and it consists of 9 members within the community. There's stakeholders, business people that represent different aspects of building. We've got soils, we've got building, we've got environmental, we've got
Citizen at large, isn't there?
we've got, thank you. And then we've got the citizens at large. We also have non-voting members that are from Public Works, Environmental Health, and then myself. We're non-voting members on the committee, and we meet monthly, and it's something that is open to the public, and we welcome citizen involvement. We truly do just roundhouse ideas, new ordinances, anything that's coming down our way, things that we can talk about, just everything in the industry that we know is going to either hit us, we're going to have to deal with, or is on our plate to move forward. We do bring that forward and we roundhouse it, workshop it several times. So we welcome any public involvement on that. It's the 3rd Thursday of the month at 2:00 across the hall in the general meeting room. And it's on our website too, the agenda of what we'll be talking about. So I welcome anything. Yeah.
Wasn't there one position still open that was at large on that?
No, it was filled. It was a realtor position, and we did just about 6 months ago fill it.
Okay,
Yes.
good. I have a question about page 12, where I see a table with on the side, it says credit/reduction. Are we going to be on a credit system from now on with?
The wildland urban phase?
You're speaking of table.
Yes, yes, it has to do with methods. It's a table B 105.1 in brackets.
We like
3.
lots of numbers. So this table was created to provide a ways and means of satisfying the requirement for fire flow. The fire code requires that you provide fire flow by an approved means. So we have gone to this place to create unapproved means. So if you can provide an assembly of credits from this table, then you've satisfied that requirement of the fire code. For instance, a typical single-family house, less than 3,600 square feet, would require an equivalency from the fire code of 1,000 gallons per minute of fire flow. So you go to this table and you see if you can find an equivalency of 1,000 gallons per minute, which is usually pretty easy to achieve given that the nature of a lot of our development is in rural areas with lots of space around them. So you're taking advantage of the resource that you have that costs you nothing, which is the space around your house.
So you're taking into consideration somebody has some flat land for grass instead of a bunch of trees around them. So that there's
Yeah, the model of the wildland urban phase code is that, putting it bluntly, your house may burn down, but you're not going to negatively impact the environment around you, your neighbor's house or the wildland. Because we're talking about areas where you may or may not receive response in a timely manner. So if you can construct your house in such a manner that your resistance from a threat coming towards you or vice versa, then you satisfy the requirement of the code.
And this is moving forward from this point on. This isn't past history.
Yeah, we adopted
Something's
this back in
existing.
2016.
Okay, and so there's going to be a site eval on this? That the location and everything qualifies for before the structure is built?
Yes, all building permit applications are accompanied by a site plan that describes where the building is located on the site. And it has comments about, distances to property lines, distances, other structures and so forth. And if your compliance path uses factors from this table, those comments will be made on the plans and in the conditions of the permit.
It's very complicated, so thanks. I could have possibly read that into being something else. So I'm glad that the staff can.
Yeah, we do offer
clarify that.
staff consultations for free, and we do these on a regular basis. We have several every week where someone comes in, it costs them nothing, and they get to meet with staff with their concepts, and we walk through the process of their options, choices, and maybe the cleanest path from getting from here to there.
I had a question that wasn't addressed. I don't believe in this, but Commissioner Weber brought up to catch basins and topography. And do we have a hydrologist? Because our aquifers get recharged. Do we have a hydrologist on our rolls? Is it a need to occasionally have one, or a study as to where a recharge would be on land?
Stormwater is done through our Public Works Department. So everything that is required on stormwater, we send over to Public Works and they review it and then.
Yeah, we're in a learning curve, a lifelong learning curve, aren't we? Yeah, I love our staff. They're great people. I'm basically here because this is all House Bill 1589. This is what you've been working on for the last year. This does not apply to the new rules and laws and regs and whatnot that they're trying to force upon you. Is that correct? This is the new laws coming down yeah. Okay, all right. You haven't even gotten hit with this yet then, House Bill 1589, the Green Energy Act, and yeah, it's a mess. And that's pretty much what I think Dahl was discussing earlier. I get in my emails, hey, look at this bill. You should take a look at this and say pro or con. And I'm kind of going to get off a little subject, but it's still on target here. As our planning is saying, this is an ongoing well, it's a freaking cat. It's a ball of string. You start disseminating the original verbiage, and it's one thing, and then you look at different substacks, and it has to do with something else. But unfortunately, it all has to do with our housing and building. And the House Bill 1589 is supposed to be, when you look it up online, it says it supports Washington clean energy economy and transitioning to a clean, affordable, and reliable energy for the future. Yeah, okay. And then one of the substacks, apparently, I haven't had the opportunity to look at the whole bill, but here I go and look it up in another place, and 1589 would ban gas companies that serve more than 500,000 customers, specifically Puget Sound Energy, PSE, from connecting new natural gas line hookups to new residential and commercial buildings, with limited exceptions for certain manufacturing, medical care, correctional, and military facilities. Now, the deal is a lot of the rural people have propane and natural gas. It's very economical, and our PUD is looking into tapping into natural
how
methane
long-
from our gut. It'll be quick. It'll be
Let's be
quick.
quick because I'm not sure, I get it
We're going
pertains to
sideways.
housing, but I'm not sure
But
it
it's
pertains to
supposed-
this particular subject.
Yeah, it's supposed
And
to be
let's
affordable.
stay
I'd
on
like
ta-
to talk, I'm backing you up on sometime you have to.
I get
you
it,
have to
and
make a
I'll give you
stand.
all times to talk, but it
Later.
might be more public comment than this public
Okay.
hearing.
Okay, all right. Well, it doesn't apply to this particular.
The energy code, yes, it's part of the body of codes under adoption.
But it's not in here.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so it does apply. Where does it, where are you meeting these qualifications?
The
for
energy,
this latest
the
bill?
content of the energy code is not published here. It just simply says that we adopt the 2021 version, except for the administrative provisions.
Okay, so that is the past one, not the one that's coming up right now.
Well, it's coming up. It's the 2021 energy code as written by the state of Washington is in effect as of March 15th.
Okay, but the bill that you just passed for the gas portion is this year, 2024. So you haven't addressed, you're not on that one, you're on, we're past.
We're on the 2021, not the 2024.
Correct. Great.
Yes, as time goes by and we move to future codes, I'm sure it will be as you've described.
And this is what I want to talk about later, but I wanted to clarify that this is past what you've already worked on.
Yes.
So just a quick question, consultation used to have a fee with them. They no longer have a fee attached to them?
Staff consults?
Yeah, consults.
Yeah, the staff consult process is, there's no fee.
Okay, and there was something in the past where I could pay you $75 if I remember, and I would get,
When we first created it, yes, but.
so
we
we're
did away
talking the
with it.
same thing, no fee.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so previous speaker kind of talked around what I saw happening yesterday. So it's the energy code that we can't amend. That's what you said yesterday, correct?
No, we can't.
Can't touch that. And it was that energy code that had gone from 6 energy credits to 8 energy credits.
Well,
And
it started
that
with.
was the basis for the significant rise. That was your word, significant rise in the cost of building a house.
Right. Each year, each adoption cycle, it seems they add 2 credits to the table. It was 5, then it was 7, then it's, let me see, last time now it's 9. So it was 7 before that. So for a typical single family house.
Right. So, and that's really kind of the core, I think, of what the problem is for us here is that the regular building code part of this is building code.
Correct.
You know, they haven't made any dramatic change in that exactly, have they? I mean, it's, when you use the term significantly rise the price of housing or building a house, you are mainly referring to the energy code.
The feedback I'm receiving from contractors is the energy code.
Yeah.
It's ways and means of accomplishing those credits. The technology becomes more expensive.
Yeah. So then it was tossed around a little bit yesterday, the SEPA hearing, you know, a way to maybe at least have a pushback would be to call for a SEPA hearing. That was your idea, I think. Is that right?
Oh, I did mention that yesterday. We discovered though, the March 15th deadline is not postponable. So we can have a hearing, and talk about it, but going back and doing a SEPA for that doesn't change that deadline. contractors need to know what the rules are. They don't need the uncertainty.
Hmm.
And, yeah, unfortunately, you didn't hear me mention it today because it's not going to serve the purpose of making sure the rules are clear as the contractors
Need it to be.
Yeah, so.
Okay. So really, we're really griping about the energy code. That's the one.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're up against right here. It's an unamendable, you can't touch it, energy code. Okay, just to be clear.
I could get a clarification. If I look at the energy code, I'm going to end up with, what's the term you just used? 2 credits or?
Yeah, the credits represent options.
Right. And so if at the end I choose something and present to you a plan that says I'm 2 credits short, you cannot issue me a permit to build. Is that correct?
Well, personally, we never say no.
Okay,
We look for ways to get you there.
Right, and I think that's for a shameless promotion of Tracy Jackson. That's an attitude of can do rather than can't do. Somebody comes to you, you try and show them how they can do what they want, but you can't guarantee that they can do what they want without additional cost.
True.
Okay.
Commissioners, and thank you for that statement, but I'm only as good as the people that you surround yourself with. So respect to my staff by all means. He's making this happen. I also want to point out too that we know that the effective date, if the board agrees to this today, that we are going to be very fudgeable as to people have been working on their plans. They've been working towards their permit. They've come in, they've had pre-applications, they've had staff consults. We're going to work with them. It's not a drop dead for us. We know we've been working with, and we are going to be more than accommodating to the current regulations as they stand yesterday. So we know that there's room. We're here to help, not hinder, we hope.
So the energy code makes it much more expensive to adopt natural gas appliances, heating, cooking, those kinds of things, right? Is that kind of the major emphasis of the change?
The philosophy appears to discourage the use of fossil fuels.
But it's not impossible.
Not impossible.
You really have to have that natural gas range because of your cooking
Well,
talents.
anyone who enjoys cooking will tell you that's the only way to do it. So
That's what they would do. So can you suggest what then can get you to that use of natural gas? What else do you have to do?
oh,
to compensate?
like I said, there's lots of tables of options. You know, you may have to change your method of framing. You know, maybe you were going to use a standard framing method and now you're going to move to advanced framing method, which will award you greater credits. Advanced framing is just an assembly of how you assemble the frame of the building with the relationship to the insulation qualities of the building. Transmittance, you know, of hard surfaces to hard surfaces, or if they're buffered with air surfaces. There's a lot of details in the construction process itself in order to use one method over another. So these are just options that you can trade here, use this to gain more over there.
All of which add money.
Well, yeah.
And let's see anything. You see no other comments? We'll close the public hearing part of that. Go ahead.
So I have an additional question. If I have a 1995 home occupancy permit and all that, and I want to add a granny flat, how much retrofit am I required to do? Am I required to bring the house to current standards, the entire house?
No.
Thank you. Don't you like simple questions? I like simple answers.
I can give you a longer answer if you'd like, but.
Oh, no, I don't like, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the updated building code ordinance as has been discussed past few days.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any, we'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Best I can give you is abstain.
Wait, you could hold your nose.
No,
Never mind, I'm only,
when do we quit bending over?
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
Okay, thanks, guys. Gina, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Gina James, Health and Human Services. The last item that we had on the agenda today was a contract amendment with Dr. Krager. This is a result of the Board of Health last week passing a resolution appointing Dr. Krager as a more, I won't use the word permanent, but not temporary health officer. So we are amending the contract that was approved a month or two ago with Dr. Krager, extending the end date. We did adjust the end date. It is just a correction. On the agenda, it still says through December of 2025, but we did adjust the end date. So it now says the contract amendment says December of 2024. So it will go through the remainder of this year.
Yeah, I like the work the Board of Health actually did on this. I'm pleased with that. We're spending less and we have a person pretty much dedicated to us. So I think it was good work and I appreciate your guys' help on it.
If you're ready, do we have any questions or anything?
Yeah, if you have questions or something on it, or you want to entertain a motion, we can do that too.
All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the contract amendment 24-0141 with Prevention MD LLC to provide the health officer services through the end of this year at a cost of $6,666 per month. And that is the company that is Dr. Krager.
Yeah.
Recommended to us by the Health Board.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Questions, comments on that? Seeing any? I don't see any hands. Call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Also vote aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina.
So, do I want to tackle this or not? I just wanted to point out that we are stuck with many difficult decisions. And we talked about, certainly in the Board of Health, the fact that we are constrained. There's a hierarchy of health officers and all that. And yet, at some point, we have no choice. So we go ahead and we agree on something. It should not be interpreted that we would endorse the RCWs that mandate these things or the idiosyncrasies that come down from Olympia. That a fair statement?
Yeah. There's very few I endorse.
Correct, but you have a lot of choices, unfortunately.
One of these years, hopefully we'll get somebody in that governor's office with some backbone and get rid of this nonsense. Well, we're open to public comments. You want to follow all that?
I'm with you on getting a decent governor. One for the people. So when it comes to affordable housing, what is going on is they just go about business as usual. rent out homes, let's say for 50, apartments for 1,500 a month, not necessarily this area. But they set aside some of the units so they can rent them out as subsidized housing and come into compliance for having affordable homes. So there's a way around the system, and the verbiage coming from Olympia is just however they want it. It's just phenomenal. It's double speak. All right, now I'm getting back to the House Bill 1589. The
You
clean
said,
energy,
the
the clean
number again,
1589.
and has that passed this current session?
Apparently, Yakima, an individual I saw a statement that the gas part of it did pass. I have yet to confirm it. The rest of this, like I said, it must be a big bill because it has different descriptors in it, you know, so it must have substacks. And the gas part being a substack, this is where they don't want new builds to have natural gas lines unless it's certain residential.
Rick, is this something our state association has been looking at?
I was just trying to rack my brain. I don't remember talking about it on last Thursday, but it doesn't mean they haven't looked at it.
My
But
question,
But this is also what some people say is the crazy time in the legislature, the last week or so.
with
They
a
try to cram
departing,
everything together to get it passed.
with a departing
knows what-
administration, yes. Yeah, trying to make points for themselves, granted. So you do talk to other counties and entities throughout the state, the smaller, Yakima, they said that this is really going to be detrimental to them. It's really going to hurt them, and it doesn't make sense. Most rural areas do have propane tanks or gas lines. When I had a place up in Lewis County, that was very economical, and that helps with your housing when your utilities are economical. And like I said, we have our own PUD that is looking into tapping the methane that's coming and utilizing it, that they have to burn off from the landfill. So that in itself affects us too, because that's going to possibly put the kibosh on that project. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work for us. And what I'm saying is,
I think the
Yeah.
issue is very real and alive. It's one of those things. We have associations that are trying to make sure that if you're operating a landfill and you're not burning off the methane, that's going to be one of those exceptions. I haven't
Okay.
heard if that's been adopted yet, but that's certainly, everybody's talking about that. The last session of the legislature, those proposals did have those exceptions in them. And again, I don't know where that is this year.
it seems like double speak, doesn't it?
Yeah, either you burn the whole thing off or you convert it to other types of energy.
And then you should be able to use it.
Yeah.
Not just have it in a tank somewhere. And then after getting that fiasco to make a comment on pro or con, and I was con, it doesn't make sense. And I'm sitting there like Bill the cat and wondering, where are you going with this? It's a double talk. It's not affordable, it's not clean, and it's not renewable to eliminate the gas, because that's what gas is. It's akin to globalists telling us that our gardens give off CO2 and are unhealthy and hurting the environment, when it's a flipping plant that's cleaning the air. It's double talk, confusing, and us people, little guys, can't keep up with the narrative or the social justices or anything else that's expected of us. I told them when it came down to this bill, and it's supposed to be economic and transitioning to a clean and an affordable and reliable energy future, but yet eliminating households using gas. Jeez. I oppose this bill because it's so poorly written. We, the people, can't keep up with the narrative on a day-to-day basis with the languages and social justice / virtue signaling. Every day, we're bombarded with this. To where these bills are written as a high school creative writing contest with colorful and open-ended meanings. Orson Welles would be so proud of this new world order double speech. Most people will seek out clean and affordable energy to save money, whether it be a business or a home. The market will take care of its own organic nature. Government's job isn't to be looking for multiple ways to meddle in free market with red tape or continue to perpetual cycle of spend, then tax more so you can spend more. And this is where I'm trying to tell you it all. I'm backing you up. I saw you at saw the recording at your last meeting. Yes, please do make a stand. At some time, you have to say, this doesn't make sense. But it shouldn't have to be on you or the rest of the county. Let's do as Commissioner Weber said you are doing, getting together with other counties and saying, no, this doesn't make sense. It stops. And you're doing a great job, so thank you.
You didn't wear your shirt today.
Excuse me, sir. Yeah, is that a collared shirt?
I was getting one that said, how did we put that yesterday? Building codes are tyranny. You know, now I think I got to change it to energy codes are tyranny.
Put the
Yeah.
word state at the very top.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there is some little bit of news that might be going in our favor a little bit, is that it is an election year. And you know, we're only two seats in the House from being a tie. And if we got 3 House seats, we'd have a majority of the House. And I think that our choices of some governor coming along ain't gonna happen. I don't see it. I don't think we'll ever get a governor on our side. But boy, if we could take over the House, we could stop a lot of this stuff. So, that's the only good news I can pull out of this, my friend. I just don't know what to tell you, man. These guys, they're just bending us over and, just completely. And it's horrible. I'm glad you abstained. I wished you'd have said no. I wished you'd have said you. Hang in there, buddy. We're with you.
Any other comments? Our meeting tomorrow, we don't have, it's just Public Works, our 2:31 where we usually bring people in. We don't have anybody scheduled for tomorrow. On the 13th, we had Gifford Pinchot. Last week, I'll say this, we had Three Rivers water treatment plant and you wouldn't think that's exciting, but there was a lot of good information. So I'm sorry you missed it because I think they do a great job over there and it was interesting to listen to and enjoy. But anyway, without any further comments, as always, we appreciate your participation and we will adjourn.